Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, we have a special guest on the show. We're joined by Robb Holman, who's an internationally recognized leadership expert, executive coach, keynote speaker, podcast co-host, and best-selling author. Welcome to the show. How are you, Robb?
Hey, Chris. Great to be with you. Honored to be on your show. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
My first question was, how do you fit all of that in, what I just mentioned?
You're good. Oh, man. Hey, sometimes I hear introductions as wonderful as you just did. And I'm like, is he talking about me? Because of just, just about humble beginnings and just even, I'm such a student. I'm here to learn just as much from you and some potential and possible questions people are going to ask me. So I'm like, really? Me? But at the same time, I have some really deep core convictions in the heart that I'm looking forward to share as well.
Nice. Well, on that point then, before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
My journey, I think a really big milestone in my journey, Chris, was back when I was 21 years old, heading into my senior year of college. And as many people say, you're 21, you're heading into your senior year of college. This is going to be like the best year of my life. At least that's what many people say, right? This summer, heading into my senior year, was actually a little scary. I was really fearful. I had a tumor, a mass in my abdomen that getting in and out of cars was really painful. And I gained enough courage to actually tell my mom, because I'm 21, I'm a guy. I'm like, I don't want to tell my mom what's going on. And I told her, and she's like, son, you need to get checked out right away. I said, Mom, in about a month, few weeks, I'm going to the college campus. I'll get a basketball physical because I played college basketball. I was captain of the team. Mm-hmm. Went to a small private university right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the States. I go to get checked out. And let me just tell you, when I went in for this doctor's visit, you know how doctors, nurses, they're supposed to play it cool when they're diagnosed and when they're checking you out. Well, let me tell you, doctor checked me out and said, I want to let you know something. You've got to get tests done right away.
Oh, God.
And when this doctor said that to a 21-year-old that was struggling emotionally, spiritually, and now physically, I became numb to the world with emotion. And so I remember walking out of that doctor's office, Chris, about a half mile across the college campus to my apartment to start making some calls. And it was the loneliest walk of my life. To fast forward the story, this mass, I got CAT scans, MRIs, ultrasounds for a month and a half. The doctors did not know exactly what it was, so they didn't know how to treat this condition.
So the entire time you're just thinking the worst, probably,
of course,
in your head, right?
Yes, human beings, whether something's extreme or it's a bit more subtle, whether you're just as a human being, let alone a business leader, a human resource leader, whatever, we can oftentimes think the worst and camp out there. And so I was not unlike many people. And so I was thinking the worst. What do I have? Cancer at age 21 and I'm going to die? My life's going to be taken prematurely. Month and a half go by. I finally see this ultrasound specialist that I had never previously seen before. He checks me out. This time was going to be radically and dramatically different than any other doctor's visit I'd ever taken in the previous month and a half. He checks the ultrasound screen out and says, I do not have words to adequately describe what I'm about to share with you and show you.
God, talk about leading it up. Right?
Oh my goodness, man. And I was a wreck before this point. I mean, I journaled during this time as a 21-year-old. I was still dealing with my parents' divorce in the home. And then they got remarried to other people a couple years later. And I was an emotional roller coaster. The doctor proceeds to say, Robb, you no longer have any mass in your abdomen. It is literally a modern day miracle.
It was gone.
It was completely gone.
What?
Yeah.
Within how many weeks?
It was a month and a half since it was first. Yeah, since they were trying to figure it out. It was even a little longer than that of when I first noticed it. And now a month and a half. Now I missed some of the preseason in basketball. I missed all. He said that to me. Now, purpose for me leading up to this point, quite frankly, at age 21, was going out with the guys and drinking on the weekends, and also winning the next basketball game. That was purpose for me. Now, coming out of this miraculous set of circumstances as a young man, I was asking a different set of questions that I've never, ever asked in my life before. Who am I? Why am I really here? what's my influence and how can I impact them for greater good? Chris, that just it changed the trajectory of my entire life. It wasn't like everything was completely black and white from that point forward, but it started a process for me that now, 22 years later, I'd be helping serve leaders all around the world with what I call my inside out leadership philosophy. And at the core of it is helping people discover or rediscover why they exist, their purpose, only to see that infused into what they do as a professional.
Yeah, I love that because it relates so much. I love it always with the story kind of brings it to life, and it relates to what we spoke about just before we went live, right? As well. It takes those moments though, really, to brings it to life, right?
And Chris, I want to share this. Like, some people could be viewing, listening, and I used to be like this. You hear a story like of a miraculous turn of events in my life or the birth of your first child. And some people could call these, whether it's great blessing or great challenge or whatever, like these aha moments, these moments of, for lack of a better phrase, great awakening in one's life. What I've also come to understand, and I'd love to encourage other people with, it may not be in your life as extreme. Yet there's subtle things that happen in our lives as leaders and even more importantly, just as human beings, to where there's a bit of a crossroad. We could either go down one certain way of thinking, one certain road that's probably not going to lead to a whole lot of great things, or we could use this subtle thing that may be challenging even and turn it to our greater good and the good of other people. And so whether it's extreme or it's more subtle in nature, there's always an opportunity for growth, for enhancement, for multiplication. I think every human being and every leader is made for momentum.
You've authored multiple books, and we really want to use this conversation to talk about your upcoming book, All In, how impactful teams build trust from the inside out. What was the inspiration behind this new book?
Yeah, just back a couple of years ago, the Association of MBAs teamed up with the Game Changer Index. I think it's like 2017. Came up with this study that really, I would say my experience matches this study. And so it's really a culmination of both. It basically said that teams are far more dysfunctional than the average person thinks. Now, I know so many, HR leaders, C-suite execs, just leaders in general, they've known that there's an engagement gap. They want to see people engaged. They want to see their workers engaged because it translates to maximum performance. But this study, what are the primary reasons why teams are so dysfunctional? Why they're not thriving, why they're just kind of surviving, why they're shriveling up a little bit more. And really over 70%, it went out to 865 leaders, cross industry lines, very diverse group of leaders. And over 70% said the number one reason why teams and organizations are so dysfunctional, poor leadership, bottom line. And a very close second and really integrated into poor leadership was ineffective communication. In other words, poor communication. So for me, I think it starts with the leader themselves. The more that they understand who they are and be more on point with effective communication, because I think so many team members are just missing one another. They want to feel more connected. They better connected. They want to feel like they're climbing the mountain together where they're unified. They're going after a certain project and living out the core values within the company and department, et cetera. But they feel this disconnect. For me, I was so inspired just because those are some things that I've observed in starting 9 organizations over the last 22 years, 3 nonprofit and 6 for-profit. And then I come across a study like this and I'm like, that nails it. And I was like, all right, let me write and truly try to get practical and be inspirational in helping leaders all around the world build trust and foster trust more from the inside out. Really, it speaks to connection at the end of the day.
Yeah. What was the biggest learning moment you had personally whilst doing your research for the book and interviewing people? Because I'm sure there's some aha moments along the way. Man. What was the biggest one that you had personally?
I love, in writing books, authoring books, I love to reflect. And so for me, it gave me an opportunity as I'm reflecting about certain circumstances that have happened in my personal life and professional life, good, bad, or indifferent. And just reflecting on the conversation I had. And then what it did was, it could have happened 10 years ago, could have happened 5 years ago. As I'm reflecting and journaling about what happened, lack of connection, lack of being present with a team member or a family member, then I would call them up on the phone or I'd meet with them over a cup of coffee. And one, Chris, that I really want to highlight and this is more on the personal front, that greatly influenced my professional life and all aspects of what I do. It was the first year of my marriage. I want to be really real and raw with you and everyone else. First year of marriage, I thought my wife and I, we've been married now over 15 years. This is our first year of marriage. It's the honeymoon stage. Come on, you're flying high. We thought trust was to the max. No, nothing could ever disrupt us. And then all of a sudden, we knew we had a problem with conflict. Mm-hmm. We had a problem with conflict, healthy conflict resolution. But it all culminated. We went to a wedding. We drove to Tennessee. Now, we're from Pennsylvania in the United States, and we drove about 9-10 hours down south.
Wow.
Yeah, for a close friend's wedding.
That's a long way. They're good friends.
So wait to hear this. It's going to seem a lot longer after what I'm about to share with you.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So my wife and I went to the wedding. We were up all night after the wedding because we could not agree on something. And my wife wanted to talk through something with me. And what I did was, and this stemmed from my childhood, was if conflict came about and I couldn't get my point across or I didn't know how to, I would shut down. And all of a sudden we were like two hamsters in a wheel of trying to communicate. We were up all night in the hotel room in Tennessee and we didn't see eye to eye. I was shutting down. My wife wanted me to talk. I left the hotel room and just kind of charged out because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react. So I figured the best way is just to leave. Mm. And so needless to say, Chris, I didn't get much sleep that night. And my wife didn't either. But really what happened was the next day we drove and spent about 9 hours in the car together. And when silence is so deafening, it's like the loudest thing in the world.
Yeah, I know. And especially after an argument as well. I think everyone sitting here can relate to.
There you go. So there my wife and I were for hours among hours in a car ride, not saying a thing. Mm. And you could cut it with a knife as far as how tangible the lack of connection was. And then, Chris, towards the end of our ride, these words came out of my mouth. And it's still to this day probably the most powerful phrase I ever have spoken in my life. All this stuff deep on the inside just boiled out. And I said, we need help. And in that moment, I thought I was a failure. I thought I failed my wife. I failed myself. And here I was trying to have all the answers, living on the coattails of the honeymoon stage and I blew it my first year of marriage. And little did I know that those are the most powerful words I ever could have spoken. Practically speaking, that opened up dialogue that was never there otherwise. Mm. My wife and I committed to, after those words came out of my mouth, my wife started to say, Robb, tell me more. And I started to share things I'd never shared with her before. And there was this level of connection where we were missing one another before. We're actually in this vulnerable place, truly learning how to connect. And practically speaking, Chris, we ended up getting counseling. We got some therapy together as a married couple. And it was beautiful. It was not easy, but we went in for about 5 or 6 sessions. And to this day, it's something practical I turn to be like, my wife and I are far from a perfect marriage, but we have a really healthy and vibrant one. And I think in large part, I've learned about how to build and foster trust in the home. And now out of that place, I help leaders all over the world learn how to do it from the inside out with some things I learned from that and some things I've learned from them that I really want to invest in people and share with them. So
you've done an amazing job at setting the scene and through storytelling, which I love. So thank you so much for opening up and sharing that. So how do we then take that and create some practical tools or that we can use to build trust that lasts in the organization? What are some practical things that we can do after this weekend, when we get back in the office on Monday? What are some of the things that we can do straight away to begin this?
Great point. So one of the things we got to be, just understand, have a level of awareness about. You ever hear the phrase what's in it for me? No, seriously, I think if all of us are honest, every person asks that question subconsciously or consciously, right? Yeah. And I don't think it's entirely bad. I think part of human nature is people want to see value in things. Either time means a lot, what they do, but what would it look like? And then I'll get really practical with you. What would it look like if the motives of our heart starts to turn, instead of what's in it for me, is what's in it for them is what's in it for me? And if we could start making it about other people, and we have to be intentional with this because our natural default is, and mechanisms behind it is, what's in it for me? What's in it for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Take. But what would happen? Again, everything great starts with a level of awareness. What would happen if we start to have more of that heart posture, more of that mindset of what's in it for them is in it for me? And now we can start to really find intentional ways to better serve those on our team or those in our sphere of influence. And just a couple practical things I want to just highlight in the midst of that journey. Being okay, not just being okay, but embracing silence in the midst of interaction with team members, with people. Like, I don't know about you. I go back to marriage so much, man. I just can't help it. But like, when my wife and I were dating,
I haven't been married long, so I've only been married a few years. So I'm going to learn from you right now.
Oh my goodness! Trust me, you've been married a few years too, Chris. I have a lot to learn from you too. So I go back when my wife and I were dating. What did we both want to do? I can speak for myself because my wife's not on the call right now, but I can speak for myself. Nothing was worse than having dead air in conversation. I wanted to fill that time. So what would I do behind the scenes? I try to say, all right, what's all these questions I could ask her? What's favorite color, favorite band, where she'd like to go on vacation? Why? Because, and I would just have tons of things to say and I would rehearse them over and over and over again. Why? Because I didn't like silence, because that early part of a relationship, what did that speak to? It spoke to nervousness, nervous energy. I just felt like we need to fill that. But to fast forward now, being married over 15 years, some of the sweetest things in my marriage are when we don't feel like we have to communicate. We're in the same room and maybe we're sharing the couch, maybe we're just doing our own thing, but yet we don't feel a need to actually share and fill dead air. And so my first practical thing I want to encourage people with building trust from the inside out with a team member or team members is embrace silence. Maybe just ask a question and do more listening than speaking. Trying to get to the heart of what that team member is, how they're responding, what they're really trying to say. You can ask a question to someone about a passion area and they can talk all day long about it.
The next part I would love to jump into, if it's all right with you, is when you talk about unity and diversity. Can you elaborate more on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, listen, if we're not careful, this is like, oh my goodness. I know diversity is a big buzzword in our culture, business culture, and everything. But if we're not careful, we just begin, it's like our natural default. We're going to surround ourselves with people that sound like us, look like us, similar personalities, similar level of interest. To some degree, it's a little bit of human nature. But I'm reminded, I went and had lunch with Steve Forbes about 1.5 years ago. And it was one of the most remarkable 2-hour lunches or lunches in general I've ever had, Chris.
Explain to everyone who that is, just in case they don't know.
Steve Forbes is he's the leader of Forbes Media, Forbes Magazine. He's just a big influencer in the area of business, finances, etc. And I think he's run for presidential office twice in his lifetime, and just a big influencer in our culture and business culture. And so Steve and I had a chance to do a lunch for a couple hours, and you better believe I was chomping at the bit to ask him a whole bunch of questions.
I bet.
Anything from faith to politics to, of course, business and finances, his family life. I mean, just as holistic as they come. And I had the floor to do so. And it was a wildly good experience, to say the least. But Steve said this, which I thought was really powerful. Again, with someone with his experience, there's nothing more powerful than having diversity of thought within any team. And for that matter, diversity in general. And I asked him about it. I followed up. I said, well, Steve, what do you mean by that? And he said, and again, I backed up based on my experience too, saying that natural gravitation is people to hire people or to see, even though you can go through the hoops to do things right in the name of diversity and everything like that, we have to be careful because we like people to validate our own opinions, our own thought processes, our own culture, etc. When sometimes we're not looking as intentionally and consistently for a diverse group of people. And so Steve was just saying, when he, in his sphere of influence within his teams, where the best happens, where the brightest and biggest ideas, the greatest inventions, the greatest momentum within media, and creating a louder space and voice for people to help people all over the world. It happens when we have a diverse culture. There's no doubt about it. So unity and diversity in the book, Chris, I talk about of what it means, what it looks like to actually go about it in an intentional fashion, finding people, looking for people that are different than you. And from the inception, valuing them as human beings, even more so than working professionals. And there's a lot of great resources out there, like personality profiles and Strengths Finder and DISC and Strengths Finder and many others that help people. At the end of the day, it is being aware we desperately need people that are different than us. And I almost view it like if you're a leader in business or in this world, you become a conductor, whether you realize it or fully realize it or not. And what orchestra sounds the best? Is it ones that have the same instruments entirely playing the same beat all the time throughout the course of a 2-hour, concert? No. It's actually when there are all these beautiful different instruments in different places strategically placed that are all joined together in performing one song. And the conductor, the leader, if you will, their job is to bring out at the certain time, they bring out the pianist, they bring out the trumpet, they bring out the flautist, they bring out all these different instruments at the right time. And now there's harmony and there's rhythm and there's togetherness and there's unity. So my encouragement to leaders is not only have that awareness, because I think many people do, honestly, at the end of the day. I think many people do, especially in the culture that we live in today. But I think at the end of the day, what ways practically, once you have a diverse team and put them into place, what things can you do as a leader? It gets back to our earlier point, right? To serve those, to learn from those team members so that you can truly become the conductor and cross-pollinate with different instruments, so to speak, with different people that look and sound and have different levels of education and everything. It's all beautiful. And you become a conductor of helping people cross-pollinate and facilitate amazing creative conversations that lead to deeper trust, to where I got your back, you got mine, let's climb the mountain together.
Yeah. Love that. And I love the analogy, by the way. I've heard a few different analogies, but that's a great one. It really kind of brings it to life. I'm sure everyone listening agrees with you, but obviously when you have that unconscious bias, it's called unconscious bias for a reason, right? Yeah, because you're not aware of it. So have you got any practical ways that you could help people could use to overcome that? And then also any ways to actually make that happen with those teams, right?
Yeah.
And communicate with them.
Great question. So number one thing is look at the books that you're reading. Look at the podcast you listen to. Most people, it's what they enjoy the most.
It's a reflection of their it's a reflection of their beliefs, right?
Yeah. Oh,
if you look at someone's YouTube, that's the danger of YouTube and social media, etc., because it shows you what you more of what you want, and as opposed to challenging it. So that's a great point.
So I'm going to challenge the status quo a little bit, right? So that's our natural default. I'm not saying it's bad. But again, we're going to surround ourselves with people that validate our own opinions, our own thoughts. Yeah. You can listen to a podcast or read a book being like, that's what's on my heart. Yes. Amen. That's awesome. And we feel good. So I'd want to encourage and I want to challenge people practically. Read a book that is against your stream to challenge your thinking. Maybe it takes you outside of your natural stream of leadership thinking or ability. Maybe it's a thought-provoking book that you would never pick up, or a podcast to listen to that, just research certain things that maybe you're even adamantly against, in a healthy way, adamantly against, to say, what can I do to actually posture myself to learn from this individual or this core content? So get a book in the next 48 hours of someone that's outside of your stream that's going to challenge you in your way of thinking. Listen to a podcast that's outside of your sphere of influence that's going to be, and maybe reach out to some friends that can help you in that process.
Maybe set up a meeting with someone in your organization as well that you've never actually had a conversation with. Maybe it's someone in another department that you don't really get on with. Go and have lunch with them. I did that before, where I was working in sales, and if you guys, in most companies, it's like sales versus marketing, right? It's like this feud in most companies against outbound sales teams, and then inbound and outbound sales teams, and then marketing. So I was like, let me just go for lunch with the marketing team. All these people had this. We worked in different offices, so there's always this conflict. And it was one of the most productive things I ever did in that company, and led to the innovation and understanding and collaboration. And it was just through that, reaching out to someone in the business in another function I never thought I'd ever speak with. So that's also another example.
Chris, you bring up a great point, because think of nudges in your life. people that just, well, I just want to hang out with people that are going to dream with me and keep my dreams alive. Yeah, that's important. I always encourage people with that. At the same time, how about people that are going to challenge your way of thinking? How about people that people may say they're pessimists, they're nudges, I don't want to hang out with them. I'm not saying you spend all your time with all the naysayers. That's not what I'm saying at all, because I believe there's a place to dream with dreamers, to keep your dreams alive, to put fuel on the fire, so to speak, so you can accomplish big things that need, that require the help of others in which to help you accomplish it. At the same time, we've got to reach out to the nudges in our life, those that are going to challenge our way of thinking, those that are actually going to rub us the wrong way at times. For me,
you need that.
We need that. Why? Because we're on this earth to be the most effective human beings and leaders as possible. And one of the greatest ways to see that through is to meet with people that don't validate your opinions and your thoughts. I'm a speaker, right? I do a lot of keynote speaking, platform speaking, interactive trainings with leaders all over our country in the United States and all over the world. And for me, I could just ask people, oh, how'd I do? People that are just going to validate and say, oh, Rob, you did a good job. But you know who I spend more time with? People that are going to have a critical eye. Because at the end of the day, we're going to come full circle. At the end of the day, it's ultimately not about me. It's about others. It's about what's in it for them is what's in it for me. And I have a voice. I have level of conviction. I have core content surrounding that. But I want to massage that. I want to enhance that based on the feedback that I get from other people so that I can be the very best that I can be and be a good steward of whom is entrusted in my care. So meet up with that nudge, meet up with that naysayer that you've been shying away from, and go in with a student's heart of what you can learn from them and how you can best serve them.
Yeah. And that's what you mean. Is that what you mean in the book when you talk about turning conflict into a creative superpower?
That's right. Now things get messy. And in the messiness, see, this is where the rubber meets the road, Chris, because a lot of people don't like to get down and dirty in the messiness of relationships. They like to kind of keep it on a surface level, keep the professional hat on, when meanwhile, people are thinking certain things and it's going to find its way out one way or another. So if it's what's in it for them is what's in it for you, and you're finding ways to go to people and be proactive, to learn from them, to grow with them, to live in life's story with them. Now there's an opportunity for them. There's an opportunity for you. But I'm here to say, listen, it does get messy. But in the messiness of life, there's an exchange that would never be there otherwise. And now we can actually look at healthy conflict resolution as an opportunity.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And something that people are always surprised about is my co-founder in many ways is the opposite of me. And we always make a joke with each other that without conflict, like if we're going for a particular project or building a product and we don't have conflict, we actually make a joke that we need to, because it's during that conflict, and it's tough sometimes, really tough, and we may not even be talking to each other for a day, but that's where the most innovative ideas and the breakthroughs happen. And we're constantly challenging each other. It's not about me, it's not about him, it's about making sure that between us come to the best conclusions, ideas, solutions. And I'll be honest, everything that's ever made a huge impact in our company has come through conflict.
Based on what you just shared, what I shared, can you imagine a culture that's committed, a business culture that's committed?
And promotes it. And
promotes it. That when there's an elephant in the room, when there's something difficult,
it's okay to say something.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Now it's just a part of who you are as a culture, as a company. And can you imagine, see what we're talking about today, how impactful teams build trust from the inside out. These are just small, but yet large, practical things that you can begin to implement as a leader. And all of a sudden, only to see these things slowly but surely rub off on your team members around you. And what you're doing is you're wrapping your arms around your team members and in this way of thinking, this learning system, if you will, and saying, we are learning what it means to love and honor one another as human beings first before working professionals. We'll get to the professional stuff, right? That becomes, in a sense, easier.
Much easier.
Know how to relate and connect and be present with one another.
Yeah. No, definitely. And now my team has no problem coming to me and telling me if I'm doing something that frustrates them, or a lot of time as leaders we are the bottleneck. Let's be honest.
Okay.
And it's not easy to take criticism and feedback, but it doesn't feel nice sometimes. But I'd rather have that than that person be holding it in, and it's a constant frustration, something holding us back. as a business, but you have to be open to that as a leader.
You
and
do.
Many leaders they say one thing, but their actions reflect something different.
They sure do. And, I talk to HR leaders all around the world. And when I share my heart, as I'm sharing today, some do have a question, Chris. They say, Rob, there's a line within business. I can't cross that line in that personal way, whatever. I'm like, yeah, you got to understand what that line is. Again, I'm not saying that every single time you get together with a team member or your team collectively, it has to turn into a full-fledged counseling session.
And not everyone's deserving of it either, by the way.
Right. Good point. You got to know, You got to know and call out drama when you see it, because as we know, drama is taking away a lot of money and a lot of productivity from many teams around the globe. And so, we've got to be able to call it out. But what we are talking about is a level of connection with people and being not so quick to dive into the problems within business, the tasks at hand, but weighing a little bit more heavily, if not, I'll make an argument, a lot more heavily on personal one-to-one connection, because then the business takes care of itself that much more easily.
What about the last part before we jump in as well? You're talking about igniting team empowerment, and you talk about team focus for outcomes that matter. So
a lot of times, open concept in business cultures become like a normal thing. What I mean is like an open door policy, right? It's becoming somewhat normal. Open door policy. I mean, even layouts of businesses, they have shared working space.
There are no doors anymore.
No, you blow up a lot of houses that are being built. It's all open concept. Why? Because people, there's a crying out for community, for a longing to belong. So I love it. But so many times people say to me, leaders say, Rob, so in light of what you're saying, I'm going to get tugged on all the time then. If I'm like a working space and I care more about someone's heart than what they have to do, and there's a level of connection, isn't that going to give way to like distractions? Like I'll have people tapping on my shoulder all the time being like, can you help me with this, Rob? Or, because trust is now built and fostered. And so can I even keep a level of focus on what I need to do? I believe that what we're talking about also has to do with setting good boundaries. Healthy relationships, a level of connection, always has boundaries around it. It's almost like my house, Chris. My house has boundary markers. Recently, my neighbor was getting something built in his property. And what did he do? He hired someone to come in to put the boundary markers up. So he knows what the boundary markers are. All the neighbors know what they are, because within the boundary, he lives life with certain people. I live a life with certain people, right? And so as long as you stay within bounds, it becomes a sandbox for you and your team to play in. That's where creativity goes wild. That's where trust is built and fostered. That's where there's a level of connection where a lot of wonderful, wonderful things happen. Within that, though, leaders and their teams have got to be clear on boundaries. Come up with the boundary markers together. Every healthy home has boundary markers. Every healthy marriage relationship has boundary markers. Every healthy leader and team members within their team has healthy boundary markers. Why? Because this is what it means to play in this space. And here's what actually becomes more of a distraction. And so when you have a level and depth of connection with another team member or an entire team, you can begin to have an intentional conversation that would never be there otherwise on how far can we take this? What's this look like? What's this mean? And it becomes the norm now. So you can actually have greater level of focus individually and as team members and as a team collectively when you actually know what your boundaries are as a leader and as a team, not the other way around. Yeah. So I just encourage people with that.
I love that one.
I always share this with people that you're either building around you or beyond you. And you talk about igniting team empowerment. When those boundaries are in place, to your point, Chris, it leads to empowerment. It leads to people taking responsibility. I mean, that's why people get hired with this area of expertise.
Yeah.
Come on. That's why you hire them, not to always report every little thing to you or to me. It's actually to be liberated to go and do their job and do it really well.
Yeah.
In the midst of that now, and I think the reason why that's so difficult in our day and age is so many people are enamored with numbers. Now, I want to, are you building around this concept of building around you or beyond you? Okay. A lot of times people, how much money are you making? How many employees do you have? How many? When what we're talking about today isn't as much about the how many, it's about the one. See, we'll come in full circle. When you invest faithfully in the one person in your life, what's in it for them is in it for you. There becomes a level of simplicity, a level of presence, a depth of influence. Now trust is truly built as a foundation that can be built upon. In the midst of that, I got your back, you got mine. Let's climb the mountain and accomplish the impossible together. Mm-hmm. And I've found the most effective teams worldwide is when they, and now listen, numbers are important. I'm not discounting numbers, businesses.
Sure.
Come on. So, but what's more important, what supersedes that is the one. And when we can devote our time, resources, and attention to getting to know and to serve the one faithfully, here's what begins to happen. You'll reach the masses by reaching the one. Yeah. And that ultimately is my message of how, being all in. Are you faithfully reaching and committed, reaching the one that's before you?
Fantastic. Well, look, Rob, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm so excited to have you on the show, and appreciate you providing so much practical advice and sharing your journey and your story, because I think that's the most impactful thing that kind of I've taken away from the conversation, and also brings it to life as well. Because many times we can talk about these strategies and these processes as well, but it's through your own personal journey and experience that is where's the most learning comes from, right?
Yeah,
as well. So before we wrap up, if there's sort of one parting piece of advice you give to everyone, what would that be? And then what's the best way for people to get in contact with you personally if they have any questions, they want to reach out to you and connect with you?
This might be a little counter of what people are, I don't know, maybe even used to hearing, but get over yourself.
It's not about you.
I say that, I just say that in all sincerity and honor of everyone listening, everyone watching. The faster you can understand it's ultimately not about you, but it's those in your sphere of influence to faithfully serve and to be a good steward of. That's the place where trust is truly built and fostered. And you talking about other things, growth and momentum and enhancement happening within your business and your sphere of influence within your business, it just will happen as a natural result. So so be faithful to the one that stands before you today.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for everyone for listening. Everything that we've been talking about, we'll have a link to Rob's website, the book.
I got to say, Chris, you've been a total joy. I mean that. Just meeting you, getting to hear your heart. Keep doing what you're doing. And if there's any ways I can serve you ongoing, just let me know. But a total blessing to be a part of the show.
Well, as we said before, right, there is no show without great guests. So appreciate you joining it, and I mean that as well. On that point, you have your own podcast, right?
Yeah.
So tell everyone where they can get a hold of that, because I watched the episode today on YouTube, which was amazing. You guys all need to check it out. So where can you learn more about that as well?
Yeah, sure. You can just go to whitecollartherapy.com, whitecollartherapy.com. The show is actually called White Collar Therapy and Leadership Show. And we've got a handful of co-hosts, and it's really to reach the aspiring or seasoned leader that's looking to do a deeper dive into my inside out leadership principles and learning systems. So love for you to come out and join us.
Fantastic. And as I said before, guys, if you're not already subscribed to the show, you can head over to hrdleaders.com/subscribe, and you can subscribe to your favorite platform, whether it's iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Spotify, whatever your preferred platform is, we're there for you. So we can make it happen. Apart from that, enjoy your weekend, everyone. Thanks again, Rob, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. See you later, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.